March 14, 1943. 0237 hours. North Atlantic, 52 degrees north 28 degrees west. In absolute darkness, 400 miles from the nearest landmass, HMS Starling's radar operator noticed something impossible. A contact so small it shouldn't exist, a metal tube barely 3 feet wide, cutting through 12-foot swells in the middle of a moonless night. The Type 291 radar had just detected what German Naval Command believed was undetectable, a submerged U-boat's periscope. What followed wasn't just a technological breakthrough. It was the moment the Atlantic turned from a German hunting ground into a killing field for the hunters themselves. The weapon that had brought Britain to its knees, the U-boat, had a fatal vulnerability that its commanders never imagined radar could exploit. The crisis that would doom the U-boat fleet had been built into its design from the first blueprint. Every Type 7 U-boat that left Lorient, Saint-Nazaire, or La Rochelle carried within it an irreconcilable contradiction that would eventually kill its crew. Commander Heinrich Lehmann Willenbrock, returning from his 7th patrol aboard U-96 in January 1943, had documented the tactical reality in his patrol report. The boat is blind underwater. We are deaf underwater. We are helpless underwater. The batteries give us 4 hours at patrol speed, perhaps 16 hours if we crawl at 2 knots. Then we must surface. We always must surface. The Type WWII U-boat, the workhorse of the Kriegsmarine's Atlantic campaign, operated on 2 separate propulsion systems. Submerged, electric motors drew power from massive lead-acid battery banks weighing 42 tons, located beneath the crew compartments. These batteries provided the only power for underwater operations. Propulsion, life support, pumps, and instruments all drew from the same finite reservoir. Technical specifications documented in Kriegsmarine engineering manuals revealed the mathematics of vulnerability. At cruising speed of 4 knots submerged, battery life extended approximately 4 hours. At economical speed of 2 knots, perhaps 16 hours. But recharging required surface running with diesel engines, engines that needed air, engines that were loud, engines that created visible exhaust. The recharging process typically required 4 to 6 hours of surface running to restore full battery capacity. During this period, the U-boat was vulnerable to air attack, surface attack, and, though German commanders didn't yet fully understand this, radar detection from distances they considered impossible. Corvettenkapitän Peter Kramer, commanding U-333, described the nightly ritual in his log from February 1943. We surface at 2,100 hours, in darkness we hope is complete. The diesels cough to life, their sound carrying for miles across calm seas. For 6 hours we are exposed, gambling that British aircraft are elsewhere, that destroyers are hunting other boats, that we remain invisible in the darkness that is our only protection. German naval intelligence, the B-Dienst, had identified British radar as a threat since 1941. But their understanding was incomplete. They knew about metric wavelength radar systems that could detect surfaced U-boats at ranges up to 20 miles. What they didn't know, what Gross Admiral Karl Donitz and his staff at BDU headquarters couldn't imagine, was that British scientists had developed centimetric radar capable of detecting objects the size of a periscope. The February 1943 operations reports from BDU documented an alarming trend. U-boat losses were accelerating. In January, 6 boats had been lost. In February, 19 boats. The survivors' reports mentioned radar-equipped aircraft arriving with impossible precision during night surface charging operations. But the pattern wasn't yet clear. What remained hidden from German naval intelligence was the revolution happening in British radar laboratories and aboard escort vessels operating in the mid-Atlantic Gap, the 1,000-mile stretch beyond the range of land-based aircraft where U-boats had operated with relative impunity for 3 years. The technology that would break the U-boat threat had been born from desperation in a laboratory at Birmingham University in February 1940. The cavity magnetron, developed by John Randall and Harry Boot, could generate microwave radiation at wavelengths of 10 centimeters, a frequency that would revolutionize detection capabilities beyond anything previously imagined. By March 1943, The Type 291 radar system had been fitted to escort vessels throughout the Western Approaches Command. The specifications documented in Admiralty technical manuals revealed capabilities that seemed impossible to conventional warfare thinking. Operating at 3000 MHz with a wavelength of 10 cm, the Type 291 could detect objects as small as a submarine periscope at ranges exceeding 2 miles in calm conditions. Lieutenant Commander Jeffrey Walker, commanding HMS Vindex, had documented the first confirmed periscope detection in his patrol log from February 28, 1943. At 0312 hours, radar operator reported contact bearing 247 degrees, range 3,400 yards. Contact intermittent, appearing and disappearing with wave motion. Proceeded to investigate. At 1,200 yards, periscope sighting confirmed visually through night binoculars. U-boat crash dived upon our approach. We proceeded with depth charge attack pattern Delta 7. The physics of centimetric radar made these detections possible where previous systems had failed. Metric wavelength radar, operating at frequencies around 200 MHz, could detect large metal objects but lacked the resolution to identify small targets like periscopes or snorkel masts. The 10 cm wavelength of Type 291 created a beam narrow enough to resolve objects measured in feet rather than hundreds of feet. Technical testing conducted at the Admiralty's Anti-Submarine Warfare Development Establishment had fairly demonstrated the system's revolutionary capabilities. Under controlled conditions with a Type WWII periscope extended to normal observation height of approximately 3 feet above the surface, Type 291 achieved reliable detection at ranges up to 4,000 yards in sea state 2 conditions. Even in rougher seas, detection ranges of 1,500 to 2,500 yards proved consistent. The implications for U-boat operations were catastrophic, though German naval intelligence remained unaware of the specific threat. Commander Herbert Werner, surviving his patrol aboard U-230 in March 1943, would later describe the new reality. We surfaced according to standard procedure, listening first, then raising the periscope for a full horizon scan, then surfacing only after confirming no threats. Yet British destroyers appeared from nowhere, charging toward our position before we completed our surface routine. It seemed like witchcraft. The tactical employment of Type 291 had been refined through combat experience documented in Western Approaches Command operational reports. Escort commanders developed specific search patterns for nighttime operations, knowing that U-boats must surface to charge batteries. The typical U-boat surfaced between 2,100 and 500 hours, spending 4 to 6 hours charging while maintaining lookouts for surface threats and listening for aircraft. British escort groups adapted their patrol patterns accordingly. Rather than random searching, they established systematic coverage of areas where U-boat activity had been reported, knowing that submarines that had submerged during daylight attacks must eventually surface to recharge. The Type 291 gave them the ability to detect these boats during their most vulnerable period, the moment they raised periscopes for final security checks before surfacing. March 1943 would become known in Kriegsmarine histories as Black March, the month when the mathematics of the Atlantic War shifted irrevocably against the U-boat force. The convergence of Type 291 radar, improved tactics, and increased escort strength created a killing field that Donet's commanders hadn't imagined possible. The pattern revealed itself through accumulated patrol reports and loss assessments compiled at BDU headquarters. During the first week of March, 7 U-boats failed to report their scheduled radio checks. By mid-month, the number had risen to 15. By month's end, German Naval Command would count 28 U-boats lost, an unsustainable rate that represented nearly 15% of operational boats. Fregatten-Captain Rolf Mutzelberg, operations officer at BDU, documented his analysis in a classified report dated March 24, 1943. The pattern is consistent across all loss reports from survivors. British escorts are locating our boats during night surface charging operations with impossible precision. Boats that follow proper security procedures, listening period, periscope reconnaissance, methodical surface routine, are being attacked before completing surfacing evolution. The British have developed detection capability that negates our tactical advantage of darkness. The specific incidents documented in survivor testimonies painted a clear picture. U-664, commanded by Oberleutnant Adolf Graf, had surfaced at 0145 hours on March 9 following standard procedure. Within 8 minutes, while still conducting post-surface security sweep, HMS Harvester appeared from bearing 320 degrees at flank speed. The U-boat crash-dived but sustained depth charge damage that forced it to surface. All hands were lost in the subsequent surface engagement. U-432, under Captain Lieutenant Hermann Eckhart, attempted night surface charging on March 11. The boat had completed a thorough periscope sweep showing no contacts within visible range. Upon surfacing at 0223 hours, lookouts reported a destroyer at approximately 3,000 yards closing at high speed. The crash dive came too late, depth charges caught U-432 still passing through 70 meters depth. There were no survivors. The tactical dilemma facing U-boat commanders became impossible to resolve. They needed to surface to charge batteries. This was not optional. The batteries would die, leaving the boat helpless. But surfacing had become nearly suicidal in areas where British escort groups operated. Even the careful, methodical approach that had worked for 3 years now seemed to offer no protection. Corvettenkapitän Siegfried von Forstner, commanding U-402, documented his experience in a radio report on March 17 that revealed the psychological impact. Attempted surface charging 0230 hours. Completed periscope reconnaissance showing clear horizon all sectors. Raised radar detection antenna, no emissions detected. Surfaced and immediately came under attack by destroyer that could not possibly have been within visual range during periscope sweep. Forced to crash dive with batteries at 37% capacity. The British are detecting us through means we cannot identify or counter. German technical intelligence was investigating reports of new British radar capabilities, but their understanding remained incomplete. They knew metric wavelength radar could detect surfaced U-boats. They had developed the METOX radar warning receiver to alert boats of radar emissions. But METOX operated at frequencies that couldn't detect centimetric wavelengths. The U-boats were essentially deaf to the very emissions hunting them. The tactical employment of Type 291 radar reached its full potential through the development of specialized hunter-killer groups that transformed convoy escort doctrine. By late March 1943, Western Approaches Command had refined operational procedures that maximized the radar's capabilities while compensating for its limitations. Captain Frederick John Walker, commanding the 2nd Escort Group aboard HMS Starling, pioneered many of the tactics that would become standard doctrine. His operational reports from March and April 1943 documented the systematic approach that turned Type 291 detections into confirmed kills. Walker's method combined radar detection with immediate aggressive action, preventing U-boats from completing their surface charging cycle and forcing them to submerge with inadequate battery reserves. The tactical procedure Walker developed was documented in Western Approaches Command Tactical Memorandum 14, distributed to all escort groups in April 1943. The protocol specified precise steps: maintain continuous Type 291 radar sweep during hours of darkness when U-boats typically surfaced, investigate all contacts regardless of size with immediate course change toward bearing, approach at maximum practical speed to minimize U-boat reaction time, illuminate target with searchlight only when within definite attack range, and execute coordinated depth charge attack if U-boat crash dived before surface engagement became possible. Walker's 2nd Escort Group demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of this approach during operations from March 30 to April 6, 1943. Operating independently of convoy escort duties, the group patrolled areas where U-boat activity had been reported, hunting submarines rather than defending merchantmen. The patrol log documented 6 Type 291 radar contacts during night operations. 4 resulted in confirmed U-boat kills: U-592 on April 1, U-635 on April 5, and U-530 and U-384 on April 6, an engagement where both boats were caught surfaced within miles of each other. The engagement with U-635 illustrated the typical tactical sequence. At 0247 hours on April 5, HMS Woodpecker's Type 291 operator reported a contact bearing 118 degrees at 3,200 yards. The contact's intermittent nature and small radar cross-section indicated a periscope or partially surfaced boat. Walker ordered an immediate course change, bringing Starling and Woodpecker toward the contact at 28 knots. At 0251 hours, lookouts on Starling reported a surfaced U-boat at approximately 1,400 yards, confirming the radar contact. The U-boat's conning tower watch spotted the approaching escorts simultaneously and the boat began its crash dive. Walker's vessels were already positioned for the attack run. At 0253 hours, as U-635 passed through 40 meters depth still diving, the first pattern of depth charges detonated around the boat's projected position. Corvette Captain Heinz Eckelmann, commanding U-635, had no opportunity to execute evasive maneuvers. The boat was caught in the vulnerable transition between surface and deep running, with ballast tanks still flooding and the hull not yet at pressure depth. The depth charge pattern ruptured fuel tanks and damaged the pressure hull. U-635 lost depth control and surfaced involuntarily at 0256 hours. Surface gunfire from both escorts destroyed the crippled submarine within minutes. There were 12 survivors from a crew of 48. Commander Donald McIntyre, commanding the 5th Escort Group, documented similar tactical successes in his patrol reports from April 1943. The Type 291 provides warning of U-boat surface activity at ranges sufficient to close and attack before the enemy completes charging operations. U-boats that previously operated with relative security during night hours now face detection and attack throughout their surface period. This fundamental shift in tactical advantage has rendered night surface operations extremely hazardous for enemy submarines. The concentration of hunter-killer groups in the mid-Atlantic Gap, the area beyond land-based air cover where U-boats had previously operated with greatest freedom, created an operational environment that negated German tactical doctrine. U-boats could no longer rely on darkness for protection during the surface charging that their battery-powered propulsion made unavoidable. British Admiralty statistics from April 1943 demonstrated the impact. Hunter-killer groups equipped with Type 291 radar achieved U-boat kill rates 3 times higher than conventional convoy escorts. The groups accounted for 32% of U-boat losses during April while representing only 11% of escort vessels at sea. While Type 291 radar provided the tactical means to detect and attack U-boats during surface operations, the strategic employment of this technology depended on intelligence systems that directed hunter-killer groups to areas where U-boats operated. The combination of signals intelligence, operational analysis, and radar technology created a comprehensive detection system that German Naval Command could not effectively counter. The Government Code and Cipher School at Bletchley Park had achieved varying degrees of success reading German naval Enigma communications throughout 1942 and early 1943. While the intelligence provided wasn't always timely enough for tactical rerouting of convoys, it provided Western Approaches Command with sufficient information to position hunter-killer groups in areas where U-boat activity was anticipated. Commander Roger Wynne, head of the Admiralty's Submarine Tracking Room, coordinated the integration of signals intelligence with operational deployment of radar-equipped escorts. His daily assessments, documented in Admiralty records, combined decoded German communications, direction-finding intercepts, sighting reports, and attack data to create comprehensive pictures of U-boat dispositions. The March 15 assessment from Wynn's section demonstrated this analytical approach. Decrypt of BDU transmission indicates Wolfpack RAWgraph positioning for convoy intercept in grid square B53. Recommend deployment of 2nd Escort Group to area with instructions to conduct Type 291 radar sweeps during hours 2100 to 0500 when U-boats will surface for battery charging. High probability of multiple contacts if escorts reach area before convoy arrival. This intelligence-driven deployment proved devastatingly effective. Walker's 2nd Escort Group reached the designated area on March 17, 36 hours before the targeted convoy. Operating independently with freedom to hunt rather than defend, the group detected and destroyed 2 U-boats from Wolfpack RAWGRAPH, U-384 and U-631, both caught during night surface charging operations exactly as WWII's assessment had predicted. German naval intelligence, the B-Dienst, had achieved considerable success reading British naval codes earlier in the war. However, by early 1943, British communications security had improved significantly. More critically, the Germans remained unaware of the extent to which their own Enigma communications were being read. Dönitz and his staff at BDU headquarters continued to issue detailed operational orders via Enigma, unknowingly providing British intelligence with precise information about U-boat positions and intentions. Fregatten-Captain Ludwig Stummel, serving as communications security officer at BDU, documented his concerns in a report dated April 2, 1943. The precision with which British forces locate our Wolfpack formations suggests possible compromise of communications security. However, technical analysis indicates Enigma encryption remains secure. The alternative explanation, that British detection technology has achieved capabilities we previously considered impossible, seems more probable though equally concerning. The irony of this assessment, revealed through post-war analysis, was that both factors contributed to German defeats. British signals intelligence provided strategic warning of U-boat deployments, while Type 291 radar provided tactical detection of individual boats. The combination created a comprehensive surveillance system that operated at strategic, operational, and tactical levels simultaneously. Operational research analysts at Western Approaches Command documented the force multiplication effect of combining intelligence with radar technology. A March 1943 analysis noted that hunter-killer groups positioned by intelligence in areas of anticipated U-boat activity achieved contact rates 4 times higher than groups conducting random patrols. When those intelligence position groups employed Type 291 radar during night operations, contact rates increased by an additional factor of 3 compared to visual detection alone. The German response to these mounting losses revealed their incomplete understanding of the threat. BDU operational orders from April 1943 emphasized improved lookout procedures, more frequent periscope sweeps before surfacing, and strict radio discipline. While these measures represented sound tactical practice, they could not counter detection technology that identified periscopes themselves and surfaced submarines regardless of lookout vigilance. Captain Zur See Gunter Hessler's tactical assessment dated April 15 acknowledged the futility of conventional countermeasures. Our boats are being located through technical means that standard evasive procedures cannot defeat. Enhanced lookout discipline provides no protection against an enemy who detects us before we detect them. As U-boat losses accelerated through April and into May 1943, German Naval Command implemented increasingly desperate technological and tactical countermeasures. Each attempt revealed how completely Type 291 radar had shifted the tactical balance and how inadequate German technical responses proved against centimetric wavelength detection. The first countermeasure, deployed in late March 1943, was the Aphrodite balloon decoy system. U-boats would release hydrogen-filled balloons carrying metallic reflectors designed to create false radar contacts. The theory held that British escorts would waste time investigating decoy contacts while the U-boat escaped. Operational testing revealed fundamental flaws documented in patrol reports from boats equipped with the system. Oberleutnant Zur See Franz Georg Reschke, commanding U-255, filed a detailed report on April 8 after deploying Aphrodite decoys during a surface charging operation interrupted by radar-equipped escorts. Released 4 decoy balloons at 0315 hours upon detecting approaching destroyer. British vessel ignored decoys completely and proceeded directly toward our position. Forced to crash dive. Post-action analysis suggests enemy radar can distinguish between decoy and actual submarine, possibly through signal characteristics or movement patterns we do not understand. The second countermeasure involved modifications to surfacing procedures documented in BDU Tactical Order 178, issued April 12, 1943. U-boats were instructed to surface only partially, maintaining minimum profile above water while running diesel engines through snorkel-like ventilation systems being hastily retrofitted to operational boats. This approach proved operationally impractical and provided no protection against Type 291 detection. Corvette Captain Robert Gicey, commanding U-177, documented the failure of partial surfacing tactics in his patrol report from April 23, attempted minimal profile surfacing at 0240 hours. Diesel engine operation proved unstable due to inadequate air supply. Battery charging rate reduced to 40% of normal efficiency. Despite minimal surface profile, British escorts detected our position within 12 minutes of surfacing. The reduced profile provides no practical detection advantage while significantly degrading charging efficiency. The most sophisticated German response was the Hagenuk radar warning receiver, introduced in May 1943 as an improvement over the earlier Metox system. Hagenuk could detect some centimetric radar emissions, but its sensitivity and response characteristics remained inadequate against Type 291's operating parameters. Technical specifications captured after the war revealed why the system failed to provide effective warning. Hagenuk operated optimally in the 8 to 12 cm wavelength range but showed reduced sensitivity at the Type 291's 10 cm wavelength. More critically, the device's detection range was typically less than the Type 291's detection range for surfaced U-boats. By the time Hagenuk alerted a boat to radar emissions, British escorts were usually already within attack range. The system provided warning that attack was imminent rather than early alert allowing evasion. Captain Lieutenant Erich Topp, one of Germany's highest-scoring U-boat commanders, described his experience with Hagenuk in a May 1943 patrol report. The detector provided warning on 3 occasions during surface charging operations. In all 3 cases, British escorts were visible on the horizon within 2 minutes of the alarm. The device confirms we are being detected but provides insufficient time for effective evasive action. We can only crash dive and hope the escorts have not yet achieved attack position. German Naval Technical Intelligence conducted extensive analysis attempting to understand British radar capabilities. A classified report from the Naval Weapons Department dated May 18, 1943 acknowledged the extent of Allied technological advantage. British centimetric radar demonstrates capabilities significantly exceeding our previous assessments. Detection of submarine periscopes at ranges beyond 3,000 meters has been confirmed through multiple incident analyses. Our current detection equipment cannot provide adequate warning, and our submarines lack technical means to avoid detection during necessary surface operations. The desperation of Germany's tactical situation became evident in proposals documented in BDU staff meeting minutes from late May. Suggestions included, attempting surface charging only during heavy weather when wave conditions might mask radar returns, concentrating boats in groups to overwhelm individual escorts through numerical superiority, and abandoning Atlantic operations entirely in favor of areas where British radar coverage was less comprehensive. Each proposal was analyzed and found inadequate. Heavy weather reduced radar effectiveness but also reduced battery charging efficiency and created operational hazards. Concentration tactics placed multiple boats at risk simultaneously when British forces located the group. Withdrawal from the Atlantic conceded strategic defeat in Germany's primary campaign against British supply lines. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. By April 1943, the tactical situation for U-boat operations had deteriorated beyond any scenario Donut's planning staff had considered possible. The combination of Type 291 radar and improved convoy escort tactics had created an operational environment where the fundamental requirements of submarine warfare, the need to surface and recharge, had become a death sentence. Captain Zur C. Eberhard Gott, Donut's chief of operations, compiled a comprehensive assessment dated April 18, 1943 that laid bare the crisis. Our boats are being detected during night surface operations at ranges and under conditions that existing technology cannot explain. Standard evasive procedures, careful periscope reconnaissance, radar detection equipment, acoustic listening, provide no warning before attack. Commanders report British escorts appearing from beyond visual range with precise bearing to submarine position. We are losing experienced commanders at rates that will destroy the U-boat arm within months if current trends continue. The loss statistics supported this grim assessment. March had seen 28 boats lost. April would claim another 16. But more significant than the numbers was the pattern of losses. Experienced commanders with multiple successful patrols were dying at the same rate as novices. Boats following proper tactical doctrine were being destroyed as readily as those making procedural errors. The traditional learning curve that allowed survivors to refine tactics and pass knowledge to new crews had been broken. Frigate Captain Gunter Hessler, Donat's son-in-law and senior tactical analyst, documented specific case studies that revealed the impossibility of the tactical situation. U-514, commanded by the highly experienced corvette Captain Hans-Jürgen Auffermann, had been lost on July 8 after 14 successful patrols. U-boats commanded by Knight's Cross recipients, men who had survived years of Atlantic combat, were being sunk during routine charging operations they had successfully completed hundreds of times previously. The psychological impact on surviving crews manifested in ways that threatened operational effectiveness. Medical officers at U-boat bases reported increased cases of combat fatigue, nervous disorders, and what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress. Crews returning from patrol described the constant tension of surface charging operations, the knowledge that every minute spent on the surface might be their last, with no warning before British escorts appeared from the darkness. Oberleutnant zur See Wolfgang Luth, one of Germany's most successful U-boat commanders, described the changed reality in his patrol report from April 1943. The night surface charging period has become an ordeal that tests crew endurance beyond reasonable limits. We surface with maximum security procedures, hydrophone sweep, periscope reconnaissance, radar detector monitoring. Yet we know these measures provide no reliable protection. British escorts can detect us through means we cannot counter. The crew understands we are visible to the enemy while blind to their approach. This knowledge affects morale and operational efficiency. The attempts to develop countermeasures revealed the depth of German technical disadvantage. The Naxos radar detector, introduced in early 1943, could detect some centimetric radar emissions but provided inadequate warning time. By the time Naxos alerted a surfaced U-boat to radar emissions, British escorts were typically already within attack range. The device's limited sensitivity and directional ambiguity meant commanders often couldn't determine threat bearing or range. Donats faced an impossible choice documented in his war diary entries from late April. Withdrawing U-boats from the North Atlantic would concede defeat in the campaign that had nearly strangled Britain. But continuing operations at current loss rates would destroy the U-boat force entirely within months. The technological advantage British centimetric radar provided had created a tactical situation with no viable German counter. The April 24 entry in Donat's war diary acknowledged the reality with unusual candor. The enemy has achieved technical superiority in detection capabilities that negates our tactical advantages. Our boats must surface to charge batteries. The enemy can detect this surfacing through means we cannot counter with existing technology. Until we develop effective countermeasures, we are sending our crews to certain death. May 1943 marked the formal acknowledgement of defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic's Central Campaign. The month would see 41 U-boats lost, a catastrophic rate representing nearly one boat destroyed for every merchant ship sunk. On May 24, Donats issued the order that effectively conceded the North Atlantic to Allied control. The message transmitted to all operational U-boats at 1,340 hours that day represented one of the most significant strategic retreats of World War II. All boats currently operating in North Atlantic west of 40 degrees west are to withdraw immediately to areas southwest of the Azores. Further operations in the North Atlantic convoy routes are suspended pending development of improved detection countermeasures and defensive equipment. The decision had been forced by mathematics that no amount of tactical innovation or crew courage could overcome. During the first 3 weeks of May, U-boat command had recorded specific incidents that made continued operations indefensible. On May 6, 4 boats from Wolfpack Elba were destroyed in a single night by escort groups that located each boat during its surface charging period. On May 12, 3 boats from Wolfpack Drossel were sunk within 6 hours, all during night surface operations. Captain Zursee Adalbert Schnee, commanding U-201 and one of the most experienced Atlantic commanders, transmitted his final patrol report on May 15 before withdrawing under Donut's orders. In 12 days of operations, we have been forced to crash dive 17 times during attempted surface charging. British escorts located our position on 14 of these occasions before we completed surfacing evolution. We detected no radar emissions prior to these attacks. Our Naxos equipment provided warning on only 3 occasions, with insufficient time to avoid detection. Battery condition is critical. We have insufficient charge to reach safe operating areas submerged. We are withdrawing on the surface in daylight, gambling on air cover, as night surface running has become suicidal. The strategic implications extended far beyond tactical defeats at sea. The U-boat campaign had been Germany's primary means of attacking British war-making capacity without requiring air or ground superiority. The withdrawal from North Atlantic convoy routes meant Britain's supply lines from America would flow increasingly unimpeded. The material accumulated in Britain for eventual invasion of Europe would arrive with acceptable losses rather than the catastrophic shipping destruction Germany needed to prevent Allied offensive operations. Post-war analysis by both German and Allied naval historians identified May 1943 as the decisive turning point in the Atlantic campaign. Gross Admiral Donitz himself acknowledged this in his memoirs, writing, "The enemy's superior detection technology, particularly their ability to locate submarines during night surface charging operations, created tactical conditions that made continued operations impossible. We could not solve the fundamental problem. Our boats required surface time to recharge batteries, and the enemy could detect this surface time from ranges that prevented evasion or counterattack." British Admiralty assessments from June 1943 explicitly credited Type 291 radar as the decisive technological advantage. First Sea Lord Admiral Sir Dudley Pound's report to the War Cabinet stated, "The introduction of centimetric radar capable of detecting submarine periscopes in surfaced submarines at night has fundamentally altered the tactical balance. U-boats that must surface to charge batteries can now be located in attack during their most vulnerable period." This capability, combined with increased escort strength and improved tactics, has rendered the mid-Atlantic area untenable for U-boat operations. The human cost of this technological defeat was documented in Kriegsmarine casualty records. Of the 1,162 U-boats commissioned during World War II, 785 would be lost, a loss rate exceeding 65%. Of approximately 40,000 men who served in U-boats, roughly 30,000 died, the highest casualty rate of any German military service. The May 1943 withdrawal came too late to prevent the destruction of the U-boat force, but it acknowledged what tactical reports had made clear: centimetric radar had broken the submarine's fundamental advantage of invisibility. The technological revolution that Type 291 radar represented would reshape naval warfare far beyond the immediate tactical victories of 1943. The principle it demonstrated, that centimetric radar could detect objects smaller than previously imagined possible, would influence naval development for decades and establish doctrines that remain relevant in modern submarine warfare. The final accounting of the technology's impact came through post-war analysis conducted by both Allied and German naval research divisions. British Operational Research Section reports documented that convoy losses dropped from 15 to 20% in early 1943 to less than 2% by August 1943. Type 291 equipped escorts accounted for 43% of U-boat kills during this period despite representing only 28% of escort vessels, a statistical advantage that confirmed the radar's decisive contribution. German post-war technical assessments, compiled by surviving U-boat commanders and technical staff for Allied intelligence services, acknowledged the completeness of their technological defeat. Fregatten-Captain Gunter Hessler's comprehensive analysis stated, "The Allied development of centimetric radar created a detection capability against which we had no effective counter. The fundamental requirement of submarine operations, surfacing to recharge batteries, became a fatal vulnerability once the enemy could detect periscopes in surfaced boats at night. Our tactical doctrine, developed over years of successful operations, became obsolete within months. The human dimension of this technological shift was documented through survivor testimonies collected in the decades following the war. At the 1973 reunion of U-boat veterans in Hamburg, Commander Herbert Werner spoke publicly about the psychological impact of facing Type 291-equipped escorts. We knew we were being hunted by technology we couldn't see or counter. Every surface charging period became a countdown to possible death. The bravest men I served with showed fear during those night surface operations, not cowardice, but rational recognition that we were visible to an enemy who remained invisible to us. The strategic implications extended to Cold War submarine development. Both American and Soviet naval architects studied the Atlantic U-boat campaign when designing nuclear submarines that eliminated the battery charging vulnerability. The ability to remain submerged indefinitely removed the tactical weakness that Type 291 had exploited so effectively. Modern submarine doctrine still references the lessons of 1943 when teaching the principle that technological advantage can negate traditional tactical approaches. The preserved records at the German Military Archives in Freiburg and the British National Archives in Kew contain the complete documentation of this technological transformation. U-boat war diaries, patrol reports, and loss assessments provide the German perspective. British Admiralty records, escort group patrol reports, and Type 291 operational logs document the Allied viewpoint. Together, they reveal how a single technological advancement, the cavity magnetron enabling centimetric radar, shifted the balance of the Atlantic War. The annual Battle of the Atlantic commemorations held in Liverpool and other British ports include specific recognition of the radar technicians and operators whose work proved as decisive as the actions of escort crews. The 2023 80th anniversary ceremony featured the last surviving Type 291 radar operator, 97-year-old veteran Richard Pemberton, who described his experience. We could see them on our screens, these tiny contacts that were U-boat periscopes. The captains trusted our reports even though it seemed impossible we could detect something so small. We were young men operating technology that was changing the war, though we didn't fully understand that at the time. The transformation was complete, from German tactical supremacy based on the U-boat's ability to hide in darkness, to Allied technological dominance that eliminated that hiding place. The streams of centimetric radar pulses that bounced off periscopes and surfaced submarines didn't just detect enemy vessels. They detected the future of naval warfare, where technology and physics would increasingly determine victory regardless of courage or tactical skill. The Type 291 radar proved a fundamental truth of 20th-century warfare. In the competition between concealment and detection, technological innovation ultimately favors those with superior industrial and scientific capacity to develop, produce, and deploy new systems faster than opponents can counter them. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.